Let me tell you this like I'd tell it to a friend, sitting outside late at night when the air feels a little too still. My name's Caleb, and this happened back in 2016, a year I still think about whenever rain starts hammering on metal. I'd been driving trucks for a long time by then. Not decades, but long enough that the road felt like a second home. I hauled freight all over the country, usually alone, sometimes talking to my sister Marla on the phone to stay awake. She worried about me a lot, said the road at night had a way of swallowing people. That trip started on the east side of the country, out near Red Hollow, Pennsylvania, and my drop-off was way out west in a place called Cedar Flats, a lonely industrial stretch near the coast. I'd driven that route plenty of times. Same long highways, same cracked asphalt, same truck stops that smelled like diesel fuel and burnt coffee. Nothing about it felt new or dangerous. That's probably why I let my guard down. I'd been driving close to 20 hours, stopping only when I had to. My eyes burned, and my shoulders ached from gripping the wheel too long. Sometime after midnight, the weather turned bad, not just a light rain either. This was the kind of storm that blurs the world into streaks of gray, the kind where the road feels smaller and narrower, like it's closing in on you. I remember thinking I just needed one more truck stop, one place to shut my eyes for a few hours. That's when the lights showed up. I didn't see them coming. That's the part that still doesn't sit right with me. The road was straight as a ruler, flat land on both sides, nothing but dark fields and the occasional broken fence. If a car had been behind me, I should have seen it miles back, but suddenly, there they were. Bright headlights right on my tail, close enough that the glare bounced off my mirrors and filled the cab. I told myself not to overthink it. People drive like idiots all the time, but then they got closer, way too close. I could feel it in my chest, the pressure you get when someone's crowding you and you can't move away. Their headlights disappeared under the edge of my trailer, and all I could see was white light flashing across wet metal. And then the lights went out. Not dimmed, not flickered, gone, in the middle of a storm. I slowed my breathing and kept my speed steady. My hands were slick with sweat as I checked my mirrors again and again. Nothing, just rain and darkness. Whoever they were either right under my trailer or gone completely. That's when a sign popped up through the rain. Truck stop -5 miles. I've never loved a road sign more in my life. For those 5 miles, I swear every shadow looked like movement. Every splash of rain sounded too loud. I kept expecting headlights to flare back on behind me, but they never did. When I finally turned into the truck stop, my heart was beating so hard it made my ears ring. The place was almost empty. A couple of rigs at the pumps. No cars. No people walking around. The lights overhead buzzed and flickered, casting long shadows across the wet pavement. I parked near the center of the lot, far from the building. I don't know why. It just felt safer than being boxed in. I sat there for a minute, listening. The storm rattled the trailer like someone knocking from the inside. I checked my mirrors. Nothing. I cracked the door and leaned out, rain soaking my jacket instantly. I scanned along the side of the trailer and behind it. No car, no footprints, just water streaming across the ground. I locked the doors, shut the engine off, and crawled into the sleeper. I texted Marla a quick, made it to a stop. All good. I didn't tell her about the lights. No point worrying her. The rain drummed on the roof, steady and heavy, like fingers tapping over and over. It pulled me under faster than I expected. I don't know how long I slept. It couldn't have been much. A violent thud ripped me awake. The whole truck shook. My stomach dropped so fast it made me dizzy. Before I could think, another bang hit the trailer, louder this time, followed by a scraping sound that crawled along the metal. I held my breath and listened. That's when I heard footsteps, slow, careful, wet shoes slapping against pavement. I opened the driver's door just enough to look out. Rain poured in immediately. Through the sheets of water, I saw it. A car parked directly behind my trailer. No headlights. No engine running. Just a dark shape, barely visible, like it was trying to hide from the light. Two men stood near the back of the trailer. I couldn't see their faces clearly, but I could see the way they moved. Nervous, jerky, like they were arguing without making noise. I froze. Before I could shut the door, it was yanked open and slammed back into me. Pain exploded across my shoulder as I fell back into the seat. A third man stood there, inches from my face, shouting for me to stay put. His hood was pulled tight around his head, rain dripping off the edge. One of his hands was buried deep in his hoodie pocket, and he kept it there, like he was holding something he didn't want me to see. "Don't move," he yelled. "Don't even think about it." I didn't. I couldn't. The truck rocked again as the others banged into the trailer, the metal groaning and popping. Every sound felt too loud inside the cab. My chest hurt from how fast my heart was going. I stared straight ahead, afraid that if I looked at him wrong, he'd do something. He never took his eyes off me. Not once. Rain streamed down his face, but he didn't blink, didn't flinch, just watched. After a few minutes, the banging stopped. I heard hurried footsteps, a door slam, and then the car engine roared to life. Tires squealed on wet pavement, and just like that, they were gone. I sat there long after, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. When I finally grabbed my phone, my hands barely worked. I called the police. I told them everything. They came, took notes, looked around. They never found a thing. No car, no suspects, nothing. Even now, years later, I think about how close that was. How quiet they were. How they turned their lights off, like they didn't want to exist. And every time I park at a truck stop in the rain, I check my mirrors a little more than I used to. I was 26 when this happened, and it was the winter of 2017, right after New Year's. I still remember that year clearly, because everything felt a little off, like the world hadn't settled properly after the holidays. I'd been visiting my Aunt Marlene and her husband in a small mountain town called Red Hollow, a place that barely showed up on maps. I grew up close to her, almost like she was a second parent, and I tried to see her at least once a year. Normally I flew, but that winter the ticket prices were insane. I'm talking more money than my car was worth. So instead of flying, I decided to drive back to my apartment in North Bend, which was several states away. I hated long drives, always had. I got bored easily, my legs cramped up, and my mind wandered to places it shouldn't. But I told myself it would be fine. I planned the whole thing carefully, even booked a cheap roadside motel so I wouldn't have to drive straight through. That plan fell apart almost immediately. The morning I was supposed to leave, a heavy snowstorm rolled in out of nowhere. Thick snow, high winds, the kind that makes the sky look white instead of gray. Roads closed. Power flickered. I ended up stuck in Red Hollow for 2 extra days, watching snow pile up against the windows and feeling more restless by the hour. By the time I finally started driving, the storm had passed, but everything still felt frozen and quiet. Too quiet. The highways were almost empty. Most people had already traveled back home after the holidays, and this route wasn't popular to begin with. Long stretches of road cut through forests and open land where you didn't see houses or towns for miles. Just snow, trees, and darkness. The first several hours were fine. I listened to podcasts, sang along badly to the radio, stopped once for coffee that tasted like burned dirt. The snow on the road kept me alert. I gripped the wheel tighter than usual, watching for ice and animal tracks. As night settled in, the world outside my windshield turned black. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness, and everything beyond that felt like it didn't exist anymore. I checked the clock. A little after 10 p.m. I was tired, but close to the motel, about 2 hours away. That's when I noticed the headlights. At first, it was just a faint glow in my rearview mirror. I didn't think much of it. Cars passed all the time, even on empty roads, but the light grew brighter, faster than it should have. I watched it come closer, my stomach tightening for reasons I couldn't explain. Soon I could tell it wasn't a regular car. It was tall, wide, a big, dark van. It came up so fast that I thought it would blast past me. The road was only one lane in each direction. No shoulder, no place to pull over. I waited for it to swing around me. It didn't. Instead, it slowed down and settled right behind me. At first, I told myself I was being dramatic. Maybe they were just pacing me. Maybe they were tired too. But minute after minute passed, and they stayed there. Way too close. So close that I couldn't see their license plate. So close that their headlights filled my mirrors and washed the inside of my car in harsh white light. It felt like being watched. 10 minutes went by. Then 15. No other cars, no tones. Just me, the road, and that van breathing down my neck. My hands started sweating on the steering wheel. I tried slowing down a little. They slowed too. I sped up. They matched it perfectly. It felt intentional, like a game I hadn't agreed to play. When I saw a sign for a gas station coming up, I felt a strange wave of relief. Light, a building, somewhere not empty. I took the exit. The van followed. That's when fear really settled in. The gas station sat alone in the middle of nowhere, a single pool of yellow light surrounded by darkness and snow. No nearby houses, no other cars. Just open land and a long stretch of road disappearing into the night. I pulled up to a pump. The van pulled in behind me. I sat there for a second, with the engine running, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Part of me wanted to drive away immediately. Another part kept whispering that I was overreacting. It was the only gas station for miles. Of course, someone else would stop. I turned off the car. The small store attached to the station was closed. The windows were dark. A crooked sign on the door said closed, swaying slightly in the wind. I stepped out into the cold. The air felt sharp in my lungs. Snow crunched under my boots, loud in the silence. A man got out of the van. I couldn't see his face clearly, just his shape. He didn't look at me. He just started pumping gas. He moved fast, too fast. I tried to act normal as I started filling my tank, but my eyes kept drifting toward him, toward the van. It was old, dark-colored, with tinted windows. I couldn't see inside at all. The man finished pumping gas in seconds. He put the nozzle back, twisted the cap shut, and walked around to the back of the van. Then I heard it. The heavy metal sound of the rear door being pulled open. It echoed across the empty station. My body reacted before my brain did. Every nerve in me screamed that something was wrong. Very wrong. I yanked the pump out of my car without even stopping it properly. That's when 3 men burst into view. They came from behind the van, running straight at me. Boots pounding, faces dark and angry. One of them smiled, and I swear it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. I dropped everything and dove into my car. One of them reached me just as I slammed the door shut. His hand grabbed the handle and pulled hard. The car shook. Another man tried the passenger side. Another hit the back door. They didn't say a word. That scared me more than anything. I locked the doors, my fingers slipping, my hands shaking so badly I almost couldn't start the engine. They yanked at the doors, circling the car like animals testing a cage. Then, suddenly, they stopped. All at once, they ran back to the van. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I slammed the gas pedal down and tore out of the station, tires skidding on the snow. In my mirror, I saw the van pull away too, heading back the way we'd come, disappearing into the dark like it had never been there at all. I drove for a long time after that. I didn't stop, not for gas, not to rest. I called the police with shaking hands and told them everything, but nothing ever came of it. No follow-up, no explanation. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about how quiet those men were, how practiced they seemed, how fast they gave up once they realized it wouldn't be easy. And I can't stop wondering how many times they'd done it before, or how many people didn't make it back to their cars in time. If you ever find yourself on a dark road, miles from anywhere, and someone starts following too closely, trust that feeling in your gut. It might be the only thing that saves you. This happened a few years back, in 2019, and even now, it still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. That night, I'm talking about a random Tuesday night, I think, I had way too much energy for someone who should have been winding down. Earlier that day, I'd had coffee after coffee, the strong kind that makes your hands feel a little jittery. By the time midnight rolled around, sleep wasn't happening. So I did what I used to do back then. I grabbed my keys, opened up my delivery app, and decided I'd make some quick cash instead of staring at the ceiling. My name's Evan, by the way. Back then, I was doing food deliveries almost every night. It was easy money, and honestly, I liked driving around when the world felt empty. That night was especially quiet. No traffic, no noise. Just long stretches of road under yellow streetlights. The kind of quiet that feels peaceful at first, until it doesn't. I was driving toward my next drop-off, humming along with the radio turned low, when my phone suddenly buzzed in the cup holder. A call from the customer. Before I could even reach for it, the call stopped. It rang for maybe 2 seconds. That alone wouldn't normally bother me, but something about it felt off. Like someone had hit the call button by accident, or changed their mind. I tried calling back. It rang, and rang, no answer. I remember laughing under my breath and shaking my head, telling myself I was overthinking it. People butt dial all the time. So I kept driving. A few minutes later, I turned off the main road and into this neighborhood called Maple Hollow. It was one of those places where every house looks kind of the same. Single-story homes, neatly trimmed lawns, dark windows, no cars moving, no porch lights on. It felt like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. The address I was heading to sat near the end of the street. I pulled into the driveway and shut off my engine. The sudden silence felt loud. I grabbed the food and walked up to the porch. That's when I noticed the front door. It wasn't closed. It was cracked open just a few inches. I stopped walking, just stood there for a second, staring at that thin black gap. I remember thinking, that's weird. Most people either leave the door fully open or fully closed. This felt deliberate. I gently knocked and said, "Hey, food delivery. I'm just leaving your order here." The words had barely left my mouth when I heard it. A dull, heavy thump. It came from somewhere deep inside the house. Not loud enough to be a slam, not soft enough to be an accident. It sounded like something hitting a door, or someone. My heart jumped. I told myself it was probably a pet, or a door swinging shut, or anything normal. I nudged the front door open a bit more and called out again, louder this time, "Food delivery." For a moment, there was nothing. Then another sound, a slow creak, like a door opening somewhere in the back of the house. Footsteps followed. A man stepped into view from the hallway. He looked to be in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. Tall, thin. His hair was messy, like he'd been running his hands through it nonstop. His eyes were wide, and his face looked tense, like he was trying not to panic. He didn't say hello. He didn't smile. He just walked straight toward me. I stood there, holding the food, suddenly very aware of how small the doorway felt. As he reached for the bag, I heard the sound again. Thump, thump. This time it was louder, clearer. It came from behind him. The man froze. I froze. We both turned our heads toward the hallway. Whatever was making that sound was closer now. The man snapped his head back toward me. His eyes locked onto mine, and I could tell instantly that he knew I'd heard it. Is everything okay in there?" I asked, my voice sounding thin, even to me. Before he could answer, the sound came again. A hard bang, like someone slamming their fists against a wall. The walls seemed to carry it, making it feel like it was coming from everywhere at once. The man swallowed hard. His jaw tightened. "Why don't you just bring the food inside?" he said. His voice was sharp, not polite, not casual. It sounded like an order. Every alarm in my head went off at once. I picked up the bag slowly, my hands shaking just a little. The air inside the house felt cold, stale, like it hadn't been aired out in a long time. I took one small step forward, and then stopped. I don't know how to explain it, but something deep in my gut screamed at me not to cross that line. The hallway behind him looked dark, too dark, and the thumping started again, faster this time, like someone was struggling. "I can't," I said quietly. "I'm not allowed to go inside." That's when his face changed. The calm mask slipped, and what was underneath scared me way more. His eyes hardened. His mouth twisted into something angry and desperate. Without warning, he lunged forward, yanked the bag out of my hands, and slammed the door shut. Right in my face. I stood there, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Through the door, I heard him walking away. Fast footsteps. Then silence. No more thumping. I didn't wait. I practically ran back to my car, locked the doors, and sat there shaking. I ended my shift right then and there, drove straight home. The next morning, I called the police and told them everything. The calls, the open door, the sounds, the way he tried to get me inside. Later that day, an officer called me back. They'd gone to the house. The man claimed he lived alone, said there was no one else there, refused to let them search the place. And that was it. No proof, no answers. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that house in Maple Hollow, about the sounds behind that door, about how close I came to stepping inside. And every time I do, I can't help but wonder who or what was making those thumping sounds, and what might have happened if I'd taken one more step forward. I want to tell you something that still gives me chills when I think about it. This happened years ago, back when I was just trying to survive school and adulthood at the same time. I've told a few people about it since, usually late at night when stories like this feel heavier, but I still don't think I've ever really processed how close I came to something terrible. It was 2022, and I was living in a small college town called Briar Hollow. You know, the kind of place. A couple of busy streets, a handful of bars everyone goes to, and a lot of quiet areas that feel almost forgotten once the sun goes down. I was a sophomore at a nearby community college, and money was always tight. To keep up with rent and gas, I worked evenings delivering food for a little Italian place called Marco's Oven. It wasn't fancy. The floors were always greasy, the radio barely worked, and the manager never remembered anyone's schedule. But it paid just enough to keep me afloat. Most nights were the same. Grab the food, hop in my old sedan, drive to someone's house or apartment, hand over the order, maybe exchange a few words, and move on. It was boring, but boring felt safe. That night started exactly like that. I clocked in around 5:30 p.m. after my last class. The sun was already starting to dip, casting that dull orange light that makes everything feel slower. I spent the next few hours bouncing from one delivery to another. Families ordering dinner, students ordering way too much food, a couple who tipped me in loose change, and didn't even say thank you. Normal stuff. Around 9 p.m., things slowed down. The kitchen was quieter, the phones weren't ringing as much, and the cooks were joking around while cleaning. I thought I might get cut early. Instead, a single order popped up on the screen. It was a big one. 3 large pizzas, breadsticks, and drinks. The address didn't look familiar, which wasn't unusual, but something about it made me pause. It wasn't a house number I recognized, and it wasn't listed as an apartment either. It was just an address with a suite number attached. I shrugged it off. I'd delivered to offices before, especially late ones where people worked night shifts. I grabbed the food, checked the receipt, and headed out. The GPS took me away from the busy part of town almost immediately. Streetlights became fewer. Stores turned into closed warehouses and dark lots. The radio crackled with static, so I shut it off and drove in silence. I remember noticing how empty the roads were. No other cars, no people walking. Just me and the hum of my engine. Eventually, the GPS led me into an area I'd never really been before. It was a small business park called Cedar Ridge Plaza. During the day, it probably looked normal. At night, it felt wrong. Rows of low office buildings sat back from the road, all dark, all quiet. No signs were lit, no windows glowed. Even the parking lot lights were off, which struck me as strange. I slowed down, scanning for the building number. The GPS told me to turn into a wide parking lot. I did, my headlights sweeping across cracked pavement and empty parking spaces. It felt like driving into a place that had been abandoned in a hurry. At the far end of the lot stood one building. Just one, 2 stories tall. No lights on outside. No cars parked anywhere nearby. I parked and stared at it for a moment. My gut told me something wasn't right. I checked the address again. It matched perfectly. I even pulled out my phone and searched the address online, half expecting it to come up wrong or outdated. But no, it pointed right where I was sitting. I told myself I was being paranoid. I grabbed the food and stepped out of my car. The air felt colder than it should have been, even for that time of year. The lot was so quiet, I could hear my own footsteps echo. I kept looking around, expecting something to move, but nothing did. The front door was glass, tinted so dark I couldn't see inside at all. I knocked lightly at first, then harder when nothing happened. I stepped back and waited. After a few seconds, the door swung open. A man stood there, smiling. He looked to be in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. He wore jeans and a hoodie like he'd just gotten home from somewhere, not like someone working late. His smile was wide, a little too wide, and his eyes stayed locked on me in a way that made my skin crawl. "Oh, thank God," he said, way too loudly. "We were starting to think you weren't coming. Everyone's starving." I glanced past him without even meaning to. Inside was a long hallway, dimly lit by a single ceiling light flickering near the middle. That was it. No voices, no movement, no signs of everyone. I told him the total, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed nervously and said something about traffic, even though there clearly hadn't been any. Then he noticed me looking behind him. "Oh, they're upstairs," he said quickly. "3rd floor, break room. We're having a little get-together after work." Something about the way he said it felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced that sentence. He pulled out a wallet and handed me cash, more than enough to cover the order. Then he added an extra bill on top and pushed it toward me. "For your trouble," he said. As soon as I took it, he leaned closer. "Hey, would you mind giving me a hand?" he asked. "There's a lot of food, and the elevator's busted. 3rd floor isn't too bad." My stomach tightened. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just hesitated. That was enough for him. He turned and started walking, talking over his shoulder, telling me where the stairs were. I followed slowly, every nerve screaming at me to stop. When we reached the stairwell door, he pushed it open. Cold air poured out like the building was breathing. Inside, the stairwell was pitch black. No lights, no windows. Just darkness going up and down. He started climbing. After a step or two, he realized I wasn't behind him. He stopped and looked back down at me. His smile twitched. "Lights are funny in this place," he joked. "You get used to it." I didn't move. The smile dropped from his face completely. In less than a second, his whole posture changed. His shoulders tensed. His eyes hardened. He turned and rushed down the stairs toward me. I didn't think. I reacted. I dropped the food and ran. I burst back into the hallway, my heart slamming against my ribs. I sprinted for the front door, threw it open, and bolted across the parking lot. I could hear footsteps behind me for just a moment, fast and heavy, then they stopped. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and peeled out of the lot. In my rearview mirror, I saw him step halfway outside, watching me leave, his face twisted into something ugly. Then he went back inside and slammed the door. I didn't stop driving until I was several blocks away. My hands were shaking so badly I had to pull over. That's when I called the police. They met me at a gas station nearby. I tried to explain everything, stumbling over my words, still out of breath. We went back to the building together. It was empty. Every room, every floor. No party, no people, no food upstairs. The stairwell lights still didn't work. The man was gone. Because he paid in cash, there was no name, no record, no way to track him. The officers told me I did the right thing. They said I probably scared him off. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that dark stairwell. I think about what might have been waiting for me on the third floor. And I know, deep down, that whatever it was, I wasn't meant to leave. I was 17 when this happened, back in the summer of 2014. I was living in a small town called Briar Hollow, a kind of place where everyone knows your face, but not always your business. That year, I worked nights delivering food for a little takeout place called Golden Walk. It wasn't fancy. Just greasy boxes, faded menus taped to the counter, and a flickering open sign that buzzed like a trapped insect. The job wasn't meant to be permanent. It was just something to earn a little money before graduation. My older cousin, Mark, managed the place, which is the only reason I got hired so fast. He was strict but fair, and he always told me the same thing before every shift. Get the food there quick, keep your head on straight, and trust your gut. Most nights were predictable. You'd get a few slow hours, then a rush, then quiet again. I liked delivering because it meant I didn't have to deal with customers staring at me from across the counter. I could just drive, listen to the radio, and drop food off at doors. Simple. That Friday night started normal enough. I clocked in at 6, grabbed my delivery bag, and barely had time to tie my shoes before Mark was handing me tickets. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Orders stacked up fast, and for the next couple of hours, I was in and out of my car like a machine. Drive, park, walk, knock, smile, repeat. By the time it was close to 9, my legs were sore and my head felt fuzzy from the constant motion. I was hungry and ready for my break. Mark handed me 3 more orders and told me that once those were done, I could eat. The first delivery was just a few blocks away. Easy. The second was across town, out past the old railroad tracks. Still normal. The third one, though, was different. I noticed right away that it hadn't been repaid. That wasn't unusual, but something about the address made me pause. It was listed as Old Meal Access Road. I didn't remember ever delivering there before. I shrugged it off and started driving. Briar Hollow isn't big, but it spreads out in weird ways. Houses thin out fast once you leave the main streets. The sky had already gone dark, and the streetlights grew farther apart as I drove. My headlights swallowed the road ahead, and the radio crackled with static no matter what station I tried. When I turned onto Old Mill Access Road, the air felt different. I know that sounds strange, but it's the only way I can describe it. The road narrowed, the pavement cracked, and trees leaned in from both sides like they were trying to listen. My GPS voice suddenly sounded louder in the silence, calmly telling me to continue straight. There were no real houses at first, just shapes, shadows, piles of brush and fences that had fallen over years ago. When the GPS said I had arrived, I slowed to a stop. There was nothing there. No porch light, no mailbox, just darkness. I sat in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Then I flicked on my high beams. That's when I saw it. Way back from the road, almost hidden behind trees and tall weeds, was a small house. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. The roof sagged. The windows were dark and half covered in vines. Between me and the house was what I realized had once been a driveway. Grass and weeds grew waist-high, tangled together like they'd never been touched by a mower. I couldn't even see the ground beneath them. There was no way my car could get through that. I should have left right then. I know that now. But at the time, I told myself I was just being paranoid. I grabbed the food bag, locked my car, and stepped into the grass. The weeds brushed against my legs, cold and wet, even though it hadn't rained. Every step made a soft crunching sound, like I was walking over old bones or dried leaves. Bugs buzzed around my ears, and somewhere close by, something rustled in the bushes. As I got closer, the house looked worse. The front door hung crooked, paint peeled off in long strips. The smell hit me next. It was damp and sour, like mold and old dirt. My stomach tightened. I stood at the door for a second, listening. I didn't hear music. I didn't hear a TV. Just silence. I knocked. Almost instantly, footsteps sounded inside. Slow, heavy. The door opened, and a woman stood there. She looked to be in her early 20s, maybe. Clean clothes, neatly brushed hair. Her smile was soft, but her eyes didn't move the way they should. They just stayed locked on me. "Hi," I said, forcing a friendly tone. "Delivery." She stared for a moment longer than felt normal, then opened the screen door and stepped back. "You can come in," she said quietly. My heart slammed against my ribs. The inside of the house was dark. I couldn't see past the doorway, but I could feel the cold air rolling out. I can just hand it to you here," I said. Her smile didn't change. "It's easier if you come in." That was it. Every alarm in my head went off at once. I took a step back, shaking my head. "Sorry, I can't." I turned around. That's when I heard it. A loud thump from the side of the house. Then another. Heavy footsteps pounding through brush. I looked to my left just in time to see two men burst out from behind the house. They were tall, dirty, moving fast. Their faces were hard to see, but I could tell they were smiling. I dropped the food and ran. The grass grabbed at my feet, trying to pull me down. I tripped once, caught myself, and kept going. Behind me, I could hear them breathing, laughing, getting closer. I reached the road, stumbled, and fell hard onto the pavement. My palms burned. I scrambled up and sprinted the last few steps to my car. I yanked the door open, jumped in, and slammed it shut. The engine roared to life. The moment it did, everything stopped. I looked up and saw them standing at the edge of the grass, watching me. Not chasing anymore, just watching. I threw the car into drive and sped away, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. I called Mark II. I was far enough away to breathe. When I told him what happened, his voice changed. He told me to pull over somewhere safe and call the police. He didn't care about the food. He didn't care about the money. The police took my statement later that night. They searched the area, but the house was empty when they arrived. No woman, no men, nothing. A few days later, they told us the land was owned by the state. No one was supposed to be living there. The trespassing sign that used to mark the road had been ripped out and tossed into the woods. I quit the delivery job not long after that. Sometimes when I drive past that area, I still feel it. That heavy, watching feeling. And every now and then, I wonder how many people followed that GPS voice all the way to the end of that road and didn't make it back. Back in 2014, I was living in a small town called Ridgewood Flats, the kind of place where everyone knows your car and nothing ever really happens. That night, I'd been visiting my cousin Evan. We weren't especially close growing up, but lately we'd been trying to reconnect, and he lived way out past Millstone County, almost an hour from anywhere that mattered. We ended up talking way longer than we planned. You know how it goes. One story turns into another, then you're laughing about stuff from years ago, and suddenly the clock says it's way later than you thought. By the time I stood up to leave, it was already around 2 in the morning. I remember Evan joking, "You sure you're good to drive this late?" I laughed it off, said something like, "I'll be fine. It's just a straight shot." That was true. Too true, honestly. The road home was a long, dead straight stretch called Holleridge Road. No streetlights, no houses, just trees pressed close on both sides, leaning in like they were listening. Once I pulled onto it, the world felt like it shrank down to my headlights and whatever they happened to land on. I was exhausted. The kind of tired where your eyes burn and your thoughts start drifting even when you don't want them to. I rolled the window down a bit, hoping the cold air would keep me awake. The road hung under my tires, steady and dull, and there wasn't another car in sight, not behind me, not coming the other way, nothing. For the first 20 minutes, it was just me and that road. Same trees, same shadows, same faint fog hugging the ground. It felt like driving through a tunnel that never ended. Then my headlights caught something way up ahead. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Just a shape, dark and wide. I slowed down without even realizing I was doing it. As I got closer, my stomach tightened. There was a massive semi-truck stopped sideways across the road, blocking both lanes completely. Not pulled over, not angled like it had broken down. It was just wrong. Like someone had dropped it there and forgotten about it. I came to a full stop a few car lengths away and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. The engine idled loudly in the silence, and suddenly I was very aware of how quiet everything else was. No crickets, no wind, nothing. We were at least 30 minutes from the nearest town. There were no gas stations, no rest stops, no reason for a truck that size to be stopped out there. I remember thinking, if this were a movie, this is where something bad happens. I checked the shoulder on the right. There was a narrow strip of gravel, then a steep drop down into a dark hill. One wrong move and I'd roll straight into the trees. On the left, the forest was packed tight. No way through. I sat there longer than I want to admit, hoping another car would show up so I wouldn't have to deal with it alone. But the road stayed empty. Finally, I told myself the obvious. Something had gone wrong. Someone might need help. That thought didn't make me feel better, but it pushed me out of the car. The moment I stepped onto the road, the silence hit harder. It felt thick, like the air before a storm. Gravel crunched under my shoes way louder than it should have. I walked toward the truck, every step slower than the last. When I reached the cab, I noticed the light inside was on. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. I knocked on the driver's door, not too hard, and called out, "Hey, you okay in there?" My voice sounded small, like it didn't belong out there. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. The window was too high for me to see inside from where I stood. I waited, listening for movement. A cough, a shuffle, anything. There was nothing. By then, my skin felt tight, like my body already knew something I didn't want to admit. I glanced down the road behind me. Fog had rolled in thicker now, swallowing up everything past a few yards. For a second, it hit me how alone I really was. I climbed onto the steps and pulled myself up enough to look through the window. The inside of the cab was trashed. Papers everywhere. A thermos tipped over. Something dark smeared across the dashboard. It looked like a fight had happened in a very small space. But there was no one inside. No driver. No passenger. Then I noticed the passenger side door was wide open. That's when my heart really started pounding. I climbed back down and slowly walked around the front of the truck, my eyes fixed on that open door. Halfway there, I caught movement to my right. Someone was coming up from the woods. At first, I thought it was a trick of the shadows. Then I saw him clearly. He was tall and thin, climbing up the hill like it took effort, but not as much as it should have. His hair hung to his shoulders in tangled clumps. His clothes were ripped and dirty, and even from a distance, I could see dark stains all over them. "Hey," I called out, my voice shaking despite myself. "Are you okay?" He didn't look at me. He just kept walking. As he stepped into the light from my headlights, I saw his face. It was smeared with dirt, and something darker was streaked along his jaw and neck. His eyes were open wide, but unfocused, like he wasn't really seeing anything. I took a step back. "Man, you don't look okay." "I can help you." "Nothing." He kept coming until he reached the road, then stopped a few feet away from me. I could smell him then. Dirt, sweat, something metallic that made my stomach turn. Trying to sound calm, I said, "I can call the cops, or an ambulance." "Whatever you need." The moment I said call, he froze. Slowly, he lifted his head and looked straight at me. His eyes locked onto mine, and I swear I felt it in my chest, like pressure. We stood there staring at each other, the truck looming behind him, the forest breathing quietly around us. "I'm fine," he said. His voice was deep and flat, like it didn't care whether I believed him or not. I didn't argue. I didn't ask another question. He turned away, climbed into the truck, and slammed the door. The engine started up with a roar that made me jump. I ran back to my car as fast as I could, hands shaking so bad I almost dropped my keys. The truck pulled away, disappearing into the fog like it had never been there. I didn't wait. I turned around and drove straight back to Evan's place, watching my mirrors the whole way. When I got there, I locked the doors and called 911, telling them everything I could remember, every detail no matter how small. Nothing ever came of it. No reports, no follow-up, just silence. But I still think about that night, about the way the truck was positioned, about the mess inside the cab, about the man who came out of the woods. I don't think he was the driver. And whatever happened down that hill, hidden by the trees, is something I hope I never find out. Some roads don't want witnesses. And some stories don't end when you get home. I was 16 that summer, back in 2014, and I was working for my Uncle Ray. He wasn't really my uncle by blood. He was my mom's old friend, but everyone just called him Uncle Ray, and I had grown up around him my whole life. He owned a small contracting business in a quiet town called Pine Hollow, the kind of place where nothing exciting ever seemed to happen. Uncle Ray ran everything himself. He had a dusty supply yard on the edge of town with a long metal warehouse that smelled like wood, oil, and rust. Inside were stacks of lumber, tool racks, buckets of screws, coils of wire, and old equipment that had been used so much the labels were worn off. He also managed a handful of job sites around town, usually repairs on old buildings or small renovations. Since I was still a kid and didn't have any real skills yet, my job was pretty simple. I drove supplies wherever they were needed. If someone ran out of nails, I brought nails. If a saw broke, I picked up a new one. I was basically the delivery guy, an errand runner. Some mornings, the crews needed materials before they showed up so they could start working right away. During the busy weeks, that meant going out really early. I'm talking 2 or 3 in the morning. It only happened during summer break, so Uncle Ray figured I had nothing better to do anyway. He paid me extra for the early shifts, and honestly, I didn't hate it. Those early mornings were quiet in a way that felt unreal. No cars, no voices, just the hum of my truck and the sound of tires on empty roads. It felt like the whole town was asleep except me. That morning started like any other. I pulled into the supply yard around 3:10 a.m. The sky was dark, no moon, just clouds hanging low like a heavy blanket. The warehouse lights flickered when I turned them on, buzzing softly as I loaded up bags of cement, metal brackets, and tool crates. A job site was an old boarding house on the far edge of Pine Hollow, near the tree line. Nobody had lived there in years. The place leaned slightly to one side, and most of the windows were boarded up. People said it used to be nice once, back when the town was bigger. Now it just sat there, rotting slowly. The drive out there took about 20 minutes. I remember yawning, tapping the steering wheel, and thinking about how quiet everything felt. No radio, no wind, just me and the road. When I pulled up to the building, something immediately felt off. There was a truck parked out front. It wasn't one of ours. Uncle Ray's trucks all had faded white paint and loud logos on the doors. This one was dark, maybe black or deep blue. The windows were tinted so dark they looked solid. No lights were on, no engine sound. Just sitting there like it had been abandoned. I sat in my truck for a moment, staring at it. It was way too early for anyone else to be there. The crew wasn't due until after 6. My stomach tightened a little, but I told myself I was being stupid. I parked and got out. The air smelled damp and sour, like wet wood and old leaves. My footsteps sounded way too loud as I walked closer to the other truck. I couldn't see inside at all. It was like looking into black glass. I turned toward the building and called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice echoed off the walls and disappeared into the trees. No answer. I tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. That's when I felt that weird crawling feeling on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me. I pulled out my phone and called Uncle Ray. It rang and rang before going to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I stood there for another second, listening. No footsteps. No doors, just silence. Finally, I convinced myself it was probably someone who had parked there overnight. Maybe a local, or a homeless guy sleeping in his truck. I didn't want to overthink it, so I got back to work. Unloading took close to an hour. The whole time, that truck never moved. No lights, no sound. Every time I bent down to grab something, I felt like I was turning my back on it. When I finished, I climbed back into my truck and started driving away. I had barely made it to the road when I checked my mirror. The other truck's headlights turned on. Bright, sudden, like it had been waiting. I slammed on my brakes and pulled over, heart pounding. In the mirror, I watched as the truck slowly backed up and rolled onto the road behind me. Someone had been in there the whole time. I knew it then. That wasn't normal. If it had been one of the workers, they would have answered me earlier. I grabbed my phone again and called Uncle Ray, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Before he could answer, the truck pulled up beside me and stopped. The window was right next to mine. I couldn't see through it, but I could feel someone there, watching, waiting. My chest felt tight. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat and tried to pull forward, but the truck moved with me, blocking the road. I tried to turn. Trees. I tried the other way. The truck stayed right there. I panicked and shifted into reverse. So did they. Then the truck bumped my door. Not hard. Just enough. I lost control. My tires slid on the gravel, and the next thing I knew, I was off the shoulder and slamming into a tree. The impact knocked the air out of me. My head hit the window, and everything rang. When I looked up, the truck was stopped at the top of the road. For a second, I thought the driver was getting out. Then the brake lights turned off. The truck sped away. I sat there shaking, my ears ringing, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. About half a minute later, another car pulled over. A man jumped out and ran toward me shouting, asking if I was okay. It was Marcus, one of Uncle Ray's newer hires. He had only seen the last few seconds, but when I told him about the truck, his face went pale. He knew whose it was. The guy's name wasn't Samuel this time. It was Cole. He'd only been working with us a few months. Later that day, Uncle Ray found out tools were missing. A lot of them. Thousands of dollars worth. All taken in one night. Everything clicked. Cole must have thought I recognized his truck. He must have thought I would talk. And for a moment out there in the dark, I don't think he cared what happened to me as long as I stayed quiet. They never found him. His paperwork turned out to be fake. His name probably was too. Even now, years later, I still wake up sometimes thinking about that dark window beside me and wondering how long he had been sitting there, watching, before I ever arrived. And that's the part that still scares me the most. This happened back in 2016, when I was 19, and I swear, I remember every detail like it was yesterday. My name's Evan, and at the time, I was packing up my life in Ridgewood Falls, a small, forgettable town where nothing ever really happened. I was leaving to stay with my older cousin Mark for a while in Clearwater Ridge. He'd offered me a spare room while I figured out school and work. I was excited, sure, but mostly nervous. I'd never been away from home that long, and I'd definitely never driven that far alone. I had my old, beat-up SUV stuffed to the ceiling. Clothes, boxes, random junk I couldn't bring myself to throw out. The trunk barely closed. The back seat was so full, I couldn't see out the rear window. It felt like my whole life was rattling behind me with every bump in the road. The trip was supposed to be around 600 miles. I planned to split it into 2 days. According to my phone, I'd reach a cheap roadside motel around 11 that night. Realistically, I knew it'd be later. I drive slow, I stop too much, and I get distracted easily. By the time the sky went dark, the road felt wrong somehow. The sun didn't just set, it vanished. 1 second there was a faint orange glow, and the next it was pure black. The highway stretched ahead of me like an endless tunnel. Every now and then, a car passed me, but once its taillights disappeared, it felt like I was completely alone again. That kind of silence messes with your head. The radio barely worked, and when it did, it was all static and half-formed voices. Around 10 at night, my eyes were burning and my thoughts were drifting. I knew I needed to stop. When my GPS showed a gas station coming up, I felt relieved. The exit led to nothing. No town, no houses, no street lights, just a narrow road cutting through darkness. The gas station sat there like it had been dropped from the sky and forgotten. 2 pumps, a tiny convenience store, 1 flickering light above the door. No cars, no people. No sound but my engine ticking as it cooled. I pulled up to a pump and stepped out. The air felt colder than it should have been, and there was this heavy stillness, like the night was holding its breath. As I reached for the pump, I suddenly heard footsteps. I nearly screamed. A man was standing a few feet away from me. I hadn't seen him approach at all. He looked to be in his late 50s, or maybe older. His clothes were dirty and layered like he'd been sleeping outside for a long time. His face was thin, his eyes sunken, and when he smiled, it didn't reach them. "Sorry," I said quickly, my heart pounding. "Didn't hear you." He didn't respond right away. He just stared at me, then glanced around the empty lot like he was checking for something. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low and scratchy. "Don't go that way," I frowned. "What?" He lifted his arm and pointed back toward the exit I'd just used. "Take that road. Go back the way you came." The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. Not angry, not scared, just flat, like a warning carved in stone. I looked where he was pointing, then back at the perfectly clear entrance ramp, just a few feet away. "That exit's one way," I said. "I can't go back up that." His eyes locked onto mine. "You don't want the other road." I didn't know what to say. I nodded just to end the conversation. "Okay, yeah, thanks." He stepped back without another word and walked off toward the side of the building. I watched him sit down against the wall, pulling his jacket tight around himself. He never looked back at me. The whole thing felt off, but I told myself he was probably drunk or confused. Still, my hands were shaking when I got back into my car. I glanced at him one last time, then drove toward the main entrance ramp. As soon as my tires hit the road, my stomach dropped. The streetlights were dead, every single one. The highway ahead was swallowed by darkness. I slowed down, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. My headlights barely cut through the black. That's when I saw movement. Just a shape at first. Something standing off to the left, right where the light didn't reach. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. Then a pickup truck appeared out of nowhere and slammed to a stop right in front of me. Before I could even react, all 4 doors flew open. 4 men jumped out. They ran straight toward my car. They were holding weapons. I saw metal bats glint in the headlights, a long blade that looked like a machete. Knives clutched in their hands. Their faces were uncovered, and that was the worst part. No masks, no fear, just blank, empty expressions. I threw my car into reverse. They were inches from my windows when I started backing up. One of them slammed something hard against my door. The sound echoed inside the car like a gunshot. As I reversed, my headlights swept across the side of the road. That's when I saw them. People, dozens of them, stepping out of the shadows, standing shoulder to shoulder, watching. Some of them started running toward me. I don't remember turning the car around. I don't remember how I did it. I just know that suddenly I was speeding away, my tires screaming, my heart trying to break out of my chest. I didn't stop driving until my GPS showed miles between me and that place. I pulled over shaking so badly I could barely dial my phone. I called 911 and tried to explain what happened, my words tumbling over each other. No one ever called me back. No officer. No follow-up. Nothing. I stayed awake the rest of the night in my locked car, parked under bright lights at a busy rest stop. When morning came, I drove straight to Mark's place without stopping again. Sometimes I think about that man at the gas station, about the way he warned me, about how calm he was. I don't know who he was or how he knew what would happen. All I know is that if I'd listened to him, I might have never seen what was waiting on that road. And maybe that's exactly what he was trying to save me from. This happened back in 2016, when I was working a local driving job for a grocery company called Northway Foods. My name's Evan, and back then I was in my mid-20s, just trying to pay rent and keep my life simple. The job itself was honestly one of the better ones I'd had. I wasn't one of those long-haul truckers who disappear for weeks at a time. I stayed within about a 50-mile loop around the city of Ridgewood, hauling pallets of groceries from a warehouse out to smaller neighborhood stores. Short drives, same roads, same routines. I was home every night, sleeping in my own bed, eating my own food. That mattered to me more than I realized at the time. That particular night felt completely ordinary at first, almost boring. I made a few deliveries, chatted briefly with store managers I'd seen 100 times before, and finally rolled up to my last stop a little after 9. The crew there took their time unloading, but I didn't mind. I was tired and ready to be done. Once they finished, I sealed the trailer and headed back toward the warehouse on the far edge of town. That stretch of road always felt a little empty, especially at night. Fewer streetlights, fewer cars, just long, dark lanes cutting through patches of trees and industrial lots. About 15 minutes from the warehouse, I realized I was running way lower on fuel than I should have been. I'd pushed it too long, distracted by the day, so I pulled off at this small gas station just off the highway. The kind of place that feels forgotten after sunset. I pulled into the diesel lane, started filling up, and leaned against the side of the truck while I waited. That's when I noticed them. Across the station, near a beat-up pickup truck, stood 4 guys. They weren't pumping gas. They weren't talking much either. They were just standing there, watching. Every few seconds, one of them would glance over at me, then at my truck, then whisper something to the others. It gave me that tight feeling in my stomach, the one you get when something feels wrong, but you can't explain why. Still, I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe they were just waiting around. Maybe they were bored. When the tank finally filled, I shut everything down and climbed back into the cab. As I pulled out of the station, I saw them all pile into their pickup at the same time. A second later, they were right behind me. That's when my nerves really kicked in. At first, they just followed me. Close. Too close. Then they started swerving, drifting in and out of their lane like they couldn't decide where to be. One second they were tailgating me. The next they were slowing way down. It felt intentional, like they wanted me to notice. I picked up my phone and called the police. I told them exactly where I was and described the truck. I said they looked drunk or reckless, and that I was worried someone was going to get hurt. A few minutes later, they pulled up alongside me. I remember glancing down and locking eyes with one of them. He was grinning, not a friendly grin, the kind that feels sharp. He said something to the guy driving, and suddenly they sped up, cut in front of me, and slammed on their brakes. I had no time to think. I hit my brakes hard, the whole truck shuddering as I barely avoided smashing into them. Then all 4 doors of the pickup flew open. They jumped out and rushed toward my truck, yelling, pounding on the doors, grabbing at the handles like animals trying to break into a cage. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I threw the truck into reverse and backed up as fast as I could. But the road was narrow, and I knew I didn't have much room. My mind raced through my options, all of them bad. I could try to drive off the road and risk flipping the trailer, or I could go straight through them. I chose the second option. I slammed it into drive and hit the gas. At the last second, they dove out of the way. The sound of metal tearing through metal echoed in the night as I plowed through the pickup. I didn't look back. I just drove. By the time I reached the warehouse, my hands were shaking. Police cars were already headed the other way. Later, I found out they caught all 4 guys standing by the wrecked truck, drunk and refusing to explain what they'd planned to do. Whatever it was, I don't think it was good. And that wasn't even the creepiest part of my life back then. A year earlier, before the trucking job, I worked nights delivering pizza for a place called Brick Oven Express. I was fresh out of high school, sharing an apartment with my cousin Liam, just trying to scrape by. One slow Tuesday night, my shift was supposed to end at 11. By 10:30, we hadn't had an order in forever, so we started cleaning up early. Then the phone rang at 10:45. Of course it did. The order came in for a place just outside of Pine Hollow, a wooded area people didn't really go unless they lived there. I was annoyed, but I took it anyway. The drive itself was quiet, too quiet. When I reached the address, I saw a long dirt driveway disappearing into thick trees. No lights, no house in sight. I checked the GPS again. It was right. I turned down the driveway and flicked on my high beams. The road narrowed into a rough gravel path, branches scraping the sides of my car. After what felt like forever, the trees opened up into a clearing. The house sat alone, dark and old, like it had been forgotten by time. I parked as close as I could and stepped out. The air felt heavy, still, like the woods were holding their breath. Halfway to the porch, I heard it. Crunching leaves, slow, careful. I froze, then forced myself to keep walking. When I knocked, my hand was shaking. The door opened to reveal an older man with blank eyes and a slow smile that didn't reach them. He barely spoke, just stared. While he counted money, I heard the leaves again, this time closer. Then the man suddenly grabbed my shoulder. I almost screamed. He handed me the cash and slammed the door shut. I ran back to my car, heart racing, flashlight shaking in my hand. I didn't see anyone, but I felt watched the entire time. Back at work, I noticed scratches on my passenger door. Fresh ones. To this day, I believe someone was hiding out there, waiting. And I don't like to think about what might have happened if they'd gotten inside my car first. Some nights, when things are quiet, I still hear leaves crunching in the dark. Back in 2019, when I was 19, my life was pretty simple. I was going to community college in a small farm town area called Briar Hollow, and I was always broke. Tuition, rent, gas, food, everything added up fast. So on weekends, I drove for a food delivery app. In this version of my life, I'll call it Quick Cart, because honestly, it felt like a constant race just to stay afloat. Most Friday nights followed the same pattern. Classes would end around 4. I'd grab a cheap coffee, sit in my car for a bit, and then start driving. I didn't hate it. It gave me an excuse to be alone, listen to music, and feel like I was at least doing something responsible with my time. That particular Friday started out totally normal. Orders were steady, tips were decent, and I remember thinking, okay, tonight might actually be worth it. Around dinner time, I was bouncing between apartments near campus and small houses nearby. Easy stuff, drop the food, smile, leave. Then, like it always does, everything suddenly died. The dinner rush ended, and the app went quiet. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 40. A couple of orders popped up, but they were awful long drives for barely any money. The kind of orders that make you feel insulted just looking at them. I kept driving anyway, looping around town with no real direction, just waiting. After almost an hour of nothing, an order finally came through that didn't look terrible. The pay was decent, and even though the drive was long about 8 miles, I figured I'd take it. I didn't want to waste the whole night sitting in my car. I accepted it and drove to the restaurant. Everything there felt normal. Bright lights, people talking, the smell of fried food. I grabbed the bag, double-checked the name, and headed back out. That's when the app told me the delivery would take 30 minutes. I remember laughing a little to myself. Most of my deliveries were close to campus. Once you went more than 15 minutes out, things changed fast. The buildings thinned out. Streetlights disappeared. Roads got narrower. And that's exactly what happened. At first, there were just fewer houses. Then long stretches of road with nothing but fields on either side. Corn, soybeans, empty land stretching into the dark. The farther I drove, the quieter everything became. No other cars, no lights. Just my headlights cutting through the road. By the time I hit the 20-minute mark, it felt like I had driven into another world. The GPS dot moved forward, but it didn't feel real anymore. The last 10 minutes were on a single dirt road that ran between massive farms. The road was uneven, and my car rattled as I went. Dust kicked up behind me, visible only when I glanced in the mirror. Finally, the app announced I had arrived. The driveway was easy to miss. It was just a narrow dirt path branching off the road, leading straight into a field. I hesitated for a second before turning in. Something about it felt wrong, but I couldn't explain why. I told myself I was being dramatic and kept going. The path stretched on longer than I expected. The road disappeared behind me, swallowed by darkness. At the very back of the field sat a small house, barely visible until my headlights hit it. It looked old, not charming, tired old, like it had been forgotten. I parked near the front and grabbed the food. I left my car running. I don't know why. I just didn't want it to feel completely dead out there. The night was silent, not peaceful silence, the kind that presses against your ears. No crickets, no wind, just nothing. The house was dark, except for a single porch light glowing weakly above the door. The grass around the house was tall and uneven, brushing against my legs as I walked up. I knocked once and waited. While standing there, I looked back at my car. It sat alone at the edge of the field, its headlights pointed at nothing. Beyond it was pure blackness. No one answered. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. That's when I really started looking at the house. The paint was peeling. The windows were dark and dusty. The porch boards creaked under my feet. It didn't look like anyone lived there. The only thing that suggested otherwise was the order, and that porch light. I stared at the light, and suddenly something clicked. I recognized it. It was one of those cheap solar-powered lights, the kind that turns on by itself when it gets dark. No one needed to be inside for that light to be on. The realization sent a cold feeling through my chest. And then I heard it, a low rumble, somewhere behind me. I turned around just as another car came rolling down the dirt path. Its headlights were off at first, then suddenly snapped on, lighting up my car from behind. It pulled in close, too close. I stood frozen on the porch as the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He didn't say anything. He didn't even look at me at first. He just stood there next to his car, facing slightly away, like he was listening for something. I called out, trying to sound calm. I asked if this was his order. He didn't answer. He slowly turned his head toward me. I couldn't see his face clearly. The shadows swallowed it. All I could make out was his shape and the way he stood completely still. My heart started pounding. The silence felt heavier than before. It hit me then how far away I was from everything. No neighbors, no traffic, no help. Without thinking, I dropped the food. I ran. I sprinted off the porch, around the side of the house, and straight into the field. The grass was tall and tangled, grabbing at my legs. I didn't stop. I didn't look where I was going. Behind me, I heard movement. Footsteps crashing through the field. I ran harder. The farther I went, the thicker the grass became. It rose up around me, blocking my view of everything. My lungs burned. My legs ached. I finally risked a glance back. I saw him. He was still coming, but slower now, struggling through the field. I pushed forward until I couldn't anymore. When the sounds faded, I slowed down and crouched low, forcing myself to breathe quietly. I stood there for what felt like forever, listening. Nothing. Eventually, I found my way out of the field and into someone else's yard. Lights were on inside their house. I almost cried when I saw them. I made it to the road and finally got enough signal to call for help. The police came and drove me back to the house. My car was still there, untouched. The food bag was still sitting on the porch. The man was gone. And that's the part that still gets me. If he wanted the food, he would have taken it. If he wanted my car, it was right there. Whatever he wanted, It wasn't either of those things? And that thought still makes my skin crawl every time I drive past an empty field at night.